Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this lecture. I'm going to be talking today about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, which I had the privilege of doing in 2017. Many of you will probably know Kilimanjaro is the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, and is the tallest mountain in Africa. Many of you will know as well that my family is originally from South Africa, so climbing Kilimanjaro has been a dream since I was quite a young boy. And so when my church that I attended in London offered me the opportunity to realise that dream, I understandably jumped at the chance. My cousins, a couple of them had already climbed it a few years before, and having talked to them about it, it just sounded like an amazing opportunity that I couldn't pass up. Just to give you a bit of background to the trip, we climbed the mountain in aid of Compassion. So we're being sponsored, and Compassion is a Christian charity that helps to give children stuck in poverty a helping hand through education and nutrition. Yeah, they're a pretty amazing charity, one that I've been involved with for a number of years, and they are involved in some of the poorest countries in the world, operating largely through the monthly sponsorship of individual children and their family. It's quite cool. You get the chance to write to the children that you sponsor, and they write back. And over a number of years, you can develop quite a close relationship with the family and with that child, knowing that you are doing a little bit to help get that child a step up in life. The child I sponsor is in Rwanda, so not too far from Tanzania. But that aside, when we started planning for this trip, we did it about a year before, and we fundraised through our church and through friends and family and the local area for the school, which is in a place called Mariakani near Mombasa in Kenya. And by the time 2017 rolled around, we were ready. We had done some trail walks before. We had gone and practiced and tried to get our fitness up a little bit, but as we'd been told by the people running the trip, it is difficult to fully prepare yourself for what you're going to face on the mountain, because even the fittest of people can struggle when you get up to the highest of altitudes. And so when we arrived in Kenya, we went off to Marikani and we visited the school that the church is involved with there. Then we spent a couple of days there, and then we set off for Kilimanjaro. On the way there, we drove from Mombasa all the way down to the foothills of Mount Kilimanjaro. As you can see in the picture there, we spent 10 hours in a coach. It wasn't too bad. One of the highlights, though, most certainly was, as I've shown you in this picture, that we saw in the middle of a national park we had to drive through, we saw what I can only assume is thousands of elephants, all moving in the same direction, crossing the road. And everything that you can see in that picture, from the elephants into the background, everything that's orange into the background there is an elephant. They range from old to young. There were some babies there as well, and it was just incredible to see some of the natural game that finds itself home in Kenya and Tanzania. That picture really doesn't do it justice. It was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life. Now, a common misconception for Kilimanjaro is that actually that's the name of the mountain, whereas that is not the case. It is the name for the national park. There are a collection of 3 major peaks in Kilimanjaro, and we were going to climb the tallest of those 3, which is known as Uhuru Peak, which in Swahili means freedom. Over the course of the next 6 days, we would summit Uhuru Peak. We would have a mixture of long days and shorter days. But what we knew is that we would be accompanied by some very, very able locals and porters who would do pretty much all the hard work for us. Every single person was assigned a porter. That person would carry the bag with all your clothes in. All you would have to carry for yourself was your water and snacks for the day. All of our meals were cooked for us. All of our tents were put up for us. I cannot understate how phenomenal those people who were with us were and the amount of hard work they put in. was absolutely incredible. So day one, we arrived at the entrance to the park, and you had to sign yourself in. We knew that we would have a short walk that day, only 750 meters elevation gain, but at this point we are at an elevation of 1,950 meters above sea level, which was already higher than anywhere in the UK, Ben Nevis being the highest at 1,345 meters above sea level. We had a briefing and we got to see all these rules that they have for climbers in Kilimanjaro, and before we knew it, we were off. A year's preparation was suddenly being put into practice. As we started to walk, we were greeted by school children who were on their way home, children who walk up and down the mountain every day, and for them this was no big deal, and they were incredibly friendly. Some of the members of our group gave them some chocolate and sweets and things, and they were very thankful for that. I don't know how thankful their parents were, though. And as we kept going up, they would peel off and go home to their various different families. A lot of the people who live on the side of Mount Kilimanjaro are farmers, because the ground is very arable, very good for growing crops. Now, one of the key messages that we were told as we set off through the day was pole pole, which in Swahili means slowly, slowly. The key to summiting Mount Kilimanjaro is to do it slowly. There's no need to rush. There's no need to charge ahead, because the slower you go, the more likely it is you'll get to the top. And so when we arrived after 3.5 hours of walking to our campsite on day one, night one, our camp was already set up. Our tents were already waiting for us. And you can probably see in the background of that third picture on the right hand side, there is a slightly larger tent, and that was the tent that we ate in. That was the tent where we would have meals served to us, breakfast, lunch and dinner, which again was incredible. And at this stage we were at an elevation of 2,671 meters. If I'm honest, at this point I was thinking, what's all the fuss about? It hadn't been that hard. I'd quite enjoyed it, but little did I know what was coming up. So day two dawns. This was quite early. This was probably about 6 o'clock in the morning. We'd been greeted already by a warm bowl of soapy water for us to have what they called a shower, and a cup of tea in our tent before we would have breakfast. What you can see here is the first sight we had of Uhuru Peak on the right hand side and Mwenzi Peak on the left hand side. We would start by walking towards Mwenzi Peak, and then we would double back up to the top of Uhuru Peak. The sign here illustrates how long, if you didn't stop, it could take you or should take you to walk from place to place. Now, I found out subsequently to doing this walk that the fastest summit attempt has been less than 7 hours. I think it took someone 6 hours and 50 something minutes to go up and down. They ran, obviously, with no bags, which just after doing this sounded unbelievable. So we were going to head off to our second camp, and as you are climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, you are, despite the weather in the first picture, you're going up through the clouds, and you are subject to whatever nature throws at you. So we started off at various times. It was pretty sunny, but as you can see in this short video, there was a moment where we found ourselves in the cloud, and it suddenly became very cold, and the members of our party had to obviously make sure that we were continually putting on layers and taking them off to keep ourselves safe. And as I alluded to earlier, here was some of the porters carrying our stuff. Now, the bags they were carrying on their heads probably weighed about 30 to 40 kilograms, and the bags that we had on our backs were probably a maximum of 7, which kind of gives you a sense of what they were doing. And they would go double, triple the speed that we were going up the mountain. It truly was amazing. We stopped for lunches in lovely little places like this little cave here, and I wanted to show you in this picture the gentleman in the middle is a guy called Jackson, who was our chief porter, chief guide, and I think without him we probably wouldn't have got to the top. He was motivational, he was interesting, he was funny, and he knew just what to say at the right moments to keep everybody together and to keep everybody working hard. And for those who are even more eagle-eyed, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of that picture, that is my triplet brother, in case you're wondering what he looks like. So we made camp on that second night, looking out over the plains of Kenya. Some of the views, the pictures don't do them justice, but they're pretty incredible. And you can make out in this picture a small blue box, which was our toilet for the 6 days that we had on the mountain. Now, when we woke up on the third day, we got our first closer views of the Uhuru Peak. You could see snow on the top there, so the walk itself felt strange that we were walking away from the mountain, but actually it makes a lot of sense in terms of being able to walk consistently the whole time. The food that we had was just incredible. Fruit and porridge every morning, lovely warm lunches and warm dinners, and yeah, as I said, the scenery was just incredible, looking out across Tanzania and Kenya. On day 3 we would have a small walk, only 3 to 4 hours, but at this point we are starting to feel like the air is thin. We're starting to gulp a little bit harder when you're walking and need to take more frequent walks, and hydration was very important as well. Making sure that we consistently drank water and being reminded was really important. Another thing the porters were incredible at doing. There wasn't much to report on day 3, if I'm honest. It was, again, beautiful, but getting more arid. And we found ourselves on the night of day 3 at Mwenzi Town. This is at the foot of the Mwenzi Peak. And from this day onwards, from this night onwards, I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. And that didn't go away until I had got down below 3,000 meters again. It was disconcerting to have that feeling, but I'm very thankful that I never once had a severe headache. I never once felt nauseous or sick or disorientated. So I'm very grateful for that. But every night when we would get to a camp, we'd get there a bit early and then we would go and do an acclimatization walk. So we would walk for another 30-40 minutes up the mountain, pause there for 20 minutes or so, and then head back down again, just to give our bodies the feeling of what it would be like higher up, but then to come back down and allow the body to recover a little bit. Now at the end of day 3, we had a lovely meal. We had a meeting with the porters, and they explained to us what was going to happen in the next 48 hours. Essentially, from day 4, we were on our summit attempt. It feels very weird, but as I explained to you what we did, it will make a bit more sense. But from the moment we woke up on day 4, we were on our summit attempt. And so day 4 arrives, and this is the part of the walk that we'd been told would be the hardest. This is the part of the walk we were told would be one of the most difficult parts, possibly harder than the summit itself. But I'm very happy to say that we did find it hard, but actually we didn't find it as difficult as it was made out. And I think that's often the case with these things, that somebody can big something up so much to you that you feel like you're not going to be able to do it, but actually when you do it, you come out the other side thinking, oh, it actually wasn't that bad. But we set off from Mwenzi Town. We had to go up a very steep part of the mountain, up and over a crest, and then you come into a part they call the saucepan, where or the saddle, because you start at a small peak and you walk down into this valley, and it's just like, the closest thing I can think about it is, it's like being on the moon. From the pictures and images I've seen from people landing on the moon, this is what it looked like. It was just stones, where we didn't really see any vegetation, and there just was hardly anything around at all, and you can see it's quite spectacular in its own way, but it was weird. It was a weird feeling. The main picture I've put on here actually is when we were on the way down, but this cloud coming in just gave a sense of sort of awesome respect for nature, and the fact that you can get caught out on the mountains, and you need to be very careful. But as we headed off, we walked for, I think it was just shy of 6 hours towards Kibo Hut, which is base camp for Mount Kilimanjaro. And you can see on the left-hand picture here the trail. And as we were walking, we could see the hut getting closer and closer. It felt like it was never going to get to us, but we could see it coming closer and closer to us. But you could also start to see and make out the route that we might take to go up the mountain to summit. And that started to get quite real at that point about what was going to happen. Now, when we arrived at Kibo Hut, we were grateful that we'd got there. We were at 4,700 meters, so my heartbeat was very strong at this point in my ears. I was tired. We'd been walking for a long time. Your body's ability to take in the oxygen is getting harder and harder, so you are struggling a lot more, and we were taking it very slowly indeed as we walked across the saddle. And when we arrived, we were told that we were going to have to go to bed. This was about 3 o'clock, 3:30, and so we all got into our tents and we tried to go to sleep. Unfortunately, there was a group of American schoolgirls that arrived to also summit, and they were staying actually in the hut itself. We were in our tents, and they were not the quietest of people. So I think all of us struggled to sleep that night. So we slept from 3 till about 11, or tried to anyway. And we'd actually been given dinner, they called it, before we'd gone to sleep. Because at 11:30 we were informed, or just after 11, we would be getting up for breakfast. That's 11 p.m, not a.m. And the reason for that is you need to start your summit attempt at around about midnight, because the shale of the mountain, the ground itself will be frozen at that point, so the walk would be made easier. Whereas if we'd gone later, A, it would get too hot, and B, the ground would be hard. It would be like walking up a mountain that was made of sand. And so we tried to sleep. I have to say it was very cold. I was super excited and nervous and apprehensive and all of the above. So I didn't sleep very much at all. But we got up for breakfast at 11:30 p.m. It was absolutely freezing, middle of the night. And we got ourselves ready. I was wearing thermals. I was wearing ski gear. I had ski jacket on, had my bag, I had as many layers as I could make out, I had a warm woolen hat, just to try and keep myself warm and motivated. I also had a few snacks I'd planned for the way up. Now, summit day as well, we had to go up 1,200 meters. It's the sharpest ascent that we have throughout all the days. But we would ascend, we would get to the top, and then we would come back down, and once everybody had arrived back down, we would have a short bit of lunch, and then we would get down the mountain as fast as possible, because once you've been at the summit, the aim is to get everybody down to a safe or a safer altitude as quickly as possible. So we got ourselves ready. Here was a picture of us. You can see me in the orange jacket in the background there. We had our boots, walking poles, some of us. We had gloves. I had 2 pairs of gloves on because my hands were getting very cold. We set off a little bit late because the American party set off late as well. So we set off about 12:15. And after half an hour, we had overtaken them. They'd taken a couple of stops already, and we'd gone over them. We were told that it would take us about 6 hours-ish, 6.5 hours to get to the first point that we needed to make to, which is a place called Gilman's Point. Essentially, we were going to walk up the side of the mountain, and we were going to get to the crater of the Kilimanjaro volcano. And at that point, when you reach the top of the crater from the path we were taking, that's called Gilman's Point. and we were told we'd get there at 6 a.m, but we ended up arriving at 4:30 in the morning, ahead of schedule, which was awesome. And we all arrived together. Nobody was struggling too badly. We were offered some really sugary hot tea, which was incredible. Gave us all a lot of energy, gave us all a sense of not that much further to go, even though we still had another couple of hours. And as we were walking, everybody, you can see in my picture, I've got headphones in, everybody was wearing headphones, just to try and get ourselves out of our own heads, try and take one step at a time and get to the top. And fun fact, I can tell you, for us to walk from the base camp to Gilman's Point was the exact amount of time, and I mean literally to the second, that it took me to listen to the entirety of the soundtracks to Hamilton and Miss Saigon. So there you go, a bit of pop trivia for you. So we get to Gilman Point, and it's time to get going again. And at this point, it started to snow on us, as you can see in the bottom left-hand side. And it didn't stop for about an hour. The wind was quite strong. It was pumping the icicles into our faces. And this picture gives you a sense of what we could actually see in the bottom left there. And so we started to walk. We walked for about another hour, just over an hour, and you get to your second major point on the summit, which is called Stella Point. Now, when you get to this point, two routes converge. A route that comes up from the Tanzania side and a route that comes up from the Kenya side both converge for the summit attempt. And Stella Point was a major moment, because we knew, as we'd been told by our guides, that once you get to Stella Point, there are 3 false summits. You will think you are getting to the summit 3 times before you actually do, which thankfully we've been prepared for that, because I think had I not known that, I would have been very, very tempted to turn around at one point, because I was walking incredibly slowly. My feet were getting cold to the point where I couldn't feel my toes. This is through thermal socks, 2 sets of thermal socks, and my walking boots, steel-capped walking boots. And having that knowledge in my head really helped me to keep going. And also, as light started to get into the sky, as you can see from these other pictures, you started to know that you were going to get there in a weird way. And as I came over the third of the false peaks, I looked up and I could see the sign for the top of the mountain. I could see a few people who were there already, who'd gone up before us. And I just wanted to be there. I didn't care how long it took me, but I was going to take a step as long as I could, just keep taking steps until I got there. So it came to pass that at 6:35, 2 hours ahead of our scheduled summit, we summited Mount Kilimanjaro, and I just about managed to take this picture looking back into the crater of the mountain. We got to the top, and I am unashamed to say that I walked up to the sign, I put my hands on it, and I cried. I was exhausted, but above all, I was standing on top of the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, and for another thing, I was standing on top of the tallest mountain, the highest point in Africa, a continent that means a lot to me. And I was overwhelmed in that moment, and I'm ashamed to say that I shed some tears. And I turned around to see my brother arriving, other members of our party arriving. I think I was the 3rd person to get there, and everybody had the same reaction. I managed to take a video at the summit, so I'll play that to you now. And I think one of the most special things about this time was that we got there as the sun was rising. So the colours were incredible. The clarity of what you can see is unbelievable. And we were above the clouds. You can see the snow that had fallen on us. Not obviously very much, but enough. And we'd made it to the famous Kilimanjaro sign. And this was us. This was our team. I'm on the far right. and this picture was sent to friends and family immediately on an email that had been set up beforehand, so they knew that we were there. So we'd done it. We'd got to the top, and it was an incredible feeling. But you're only advised to spend between 10 and 15 minutes on the top of the mountain, because the longer you spend up there, the longer you leave yourself susceptible to altitude sickness. And after about 10 minutes, my brother said he was starting to get a headache, and the guide Jackson, who's on the right hand side there in this picture, he looked at him closely in the eyes and said, "We're going down now. We're going down." So he set off, and he set off at what I can only describe as a light jog, which to me did not sound like a good idea. But I decided to go with my brother as well. So it's me, Jackson, and my brother, just to make sure that there was someone else there in case anything went wrong. But thankfully it didn't. And the way down was one of the most thrilling experiences, because it didn't take very long at all. It took us 6.5 hours to get to the top, but only an hour and 20 minutes to get down. And I would say that we did a light jog to get down. And once you get to the steeper part of the mountain, past Gilman Point, you clamber over what's called Jamaica Rocks, big boulders that you have to make your way through. You get down to the shale. And the quickest way down the shale, rather than doing the zigzag paths up the mountain, the switchbacks as they call them in America, you just run down the side and you surf essentially down the shale. You jump from foot to foot and just allow yourself to slide a bit, and then you jump to your next foot, allow yourself to slide a bit, and you come down quickly. My legs were incredibly sore the next day because of this, but the fun of it meant that I didn't want to stop. I wanted to keep going. And we could see, as you can see from these pictures, that it had snowed on the way up. We could see where we'd come from, Mowenzi Tarn in the background there of those two bottom pictures. And you could also see the whole crater getting lighter and lighter, and it was getting warmer and warmer. And so we made it down, and I was in my tent at 8:15 or 8:20, and I had a bit of a nap as other members of my party came down. Two of the party had suffered from altitude sickness, but thankfully only on the way down. They arrived, and for anyone who ever gets a chance to see somebody with altitude sickness, if it's not that serious, it can be very amusing. They basically just appear very drunk, and thankfully none of our party were sick or vomited, but they were saying some pretty hilarious stuff on the way down, which we spent the next couple of days joking with them about, because they didn't remember very much about it. And as I said, when you get down to your hut, I had a brief lie down in my tent to wait for everyone to come back down, but as soon as everyone was there, we had some lunch, and then we set off down to our final night on the mountain, Horombo Huts, which would be at 3,720 meters elevation. And we would, that day, that whole time going across the saddle up to the summit and back down, I don't think I'd had more than 10 minutes of sleep. And that night we all slept probably the best sleep I've ever had in my life. The next day, sadly, we had to say goodbye to the porters. We did a ceremony with them where we gave a tip to those who'd been carrying our bags, and we were very fortunate for them to give us a thank you, to give us a goodbye. And they sang for us. They sang some local songs, and I'm going to give you a taste of that here. For those who are interested, my Porter Frank is the one on the far left with the cool hat. He was a legend. He was so friendly, and he would greet me every evening with a smile. And I'm very grateful for him, because again, without him, I don't think I would have got to the top of the mountain. So we said goodbye, and we set off on our final descent. It was 12 kilometers down, so not too long when you are walking downhill, and every step you're taking, You feel like it's easy to breathe. You feel like you're getting more oxygen. So as we went, we had, again, amazing views. Halfway down, we went through a little eco camp, and we saw these awesome monkeys, which, again, I don't know what they are, but they were pretty cool, making some crazy sounds. And we finally reached the end. And just as we had signed in, we had to sign out again, and that was it. Our time had finished. Our time was done. And this was us. Some of us, as we arrived, a few people had to come on the way down to some blisters, so they were a bit slower. But we arrived and I remember having a can of warm Coke because the fridge in the shop at the exit wasn't working properly, and I didn't care that it was warm. It tasted amazing. It's not an advert for Coke, but it did just taste incredible. And that was it. We'd done it. We'd reached the top. We'd come back down. And I think what was the most incredible for me on this whole trip was reaching the summit as a group of 10. We all got to the summit within 2 minutes of each other. And to put that into perspective, the guide Ben, who had walked with us, who had organised the whole trip, this was his 16th summiting of Uhuru Peak in Kilimanjaro Park, and he said that this was the first time that he'd ever had a group all summit at the same time and had nobody get altitude sickness and have to go back down. So we felt really, really fortunate, really blessed in that respect to get there. And so that was it. We then had a couple of days just decompressing. We had a nice stay in a little hotel with a pool, and then we headed home, all being able to share our stories with our families and take memories that I think I'll have for the rest of my life. We still get together as a group. We still have reunions, and I would highly recommend, if anybody wanted to, I think climbing Mount Kilimanjaro to get to Uhuru Peak is up there with one of the best things you can do to challenge yourself and to put yourself into a situation where you feel a bit uncomfortable. Well, thanks for listening. I've rambled on for quite a long time now. I hope you've taken something away from this. If anyone has any questions they want to ask me about this, if anyone wants to know more about it, then let me know, send me an email, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you all at some point soon when we get through this lockdown. So thanks for listening, and goodbye.